Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer, number LB4350-400-637. This is a spring hinge, and it's in a relatively unusual finish, which is the US 9 or 637 finish, which is polished bronze with a clear coat. Polished bronze is relatively unusual. I think it's a really nice color. Depending on how the light looks at it, it does admittedly on the camera look a lot like brass. But when you here it looks quite brass, but in actuality, it's certainly not. That it is undeniably bronze in color. Okay, you can see that bronze tone that comes in right in there. That's really what it looks like. And I think it's just the lights reflecting or coming off the lighting overhead. So this is an LB4350. What that means is that it is a single acting spring hinge from Bommer. It is a LB for Lube bearing, a maintenance-free construction type of hinge assembly from Bommer, specific to Bommer, which makes it a three-knuckle hinge. Any LB hinge from Bommer is indeed a three-knuckle hinge as well. The 4350, all of that conspires to mean the size of, well, it conspires to mean the size of this hinge because it's an unusual width or a less common width. Also means the specific locations of these screw holes as well. Also means that it is square corner and that it is a residential weight leaf thickness. So there is a link below this video to a document called template, and that template will allow you to review the screw hole locations specifically. So if you're unsure if you have a hinge that will match this, you'll want to refer to that template. But then also immediately you're going to notice that this is not a hinge that has equal leaf widths. This is a 3 3/4 wide hinge, and that also is in the 4350 part number. So the width, the location of the screw holes, the thickness, and this is about 96, yeah it is indeed 96 thousandths thick, and that it's square corner. Okay, all of that means LB4350, means 4350. As you change 4350 into something else, you'll get a different hinge, in fact. So that template will allow you to review all of that. Now they have the size afterwards, a 400, that in Bommer language really means 4x4, but being a LB4350, this is 4x3 3/4. So if you have a hinge, and they're out there, 3 3/4 inch wide hinges with an unusual leaf length on one side, which is known to work for Peachtree manufactured doors and frames, you'd be looking at this unit certainly. Okay, then the 637 in the part number is your polished bronze. You're going to get screws in a complementary finish for the hinge. You're going to get they have enough machine screws in here to do it for a metal door by metal frame. And they have enough screws in here to do it for a wood door by wood frame as well. By all means, feel free to indicate the screw package that you'd like to have with the hinge. If you're doing a wood door and a steel frame application, just indicate half wood screws, half machine screws, or if it's all wood, indicate that, because I don't find that they send all screws in all instances, and I'm not sure of the hard and fast rules about what screws you get when you order a particular hinge. It's best to clarify that in the comment field so that we can include that to the factory, that comment, that request when you send it in. Okay, see, so the 639, that is again polished bronze over steel with a clear coat. Obviously, as you change this, pardon me, I said 639, I'm thinking US 9, it's 637. As you change the 637 part number, you're indeed going to get a different finish. And being Bommer, they can, whatever finish that they can plate onto steel, they can produce a hinge for that sort of finish. So be mindful that they can do lots of capabilities. So this is a spring hinge, and let's discuss that. First, there is information down below the video. It's a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves here that when the leaves are brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. So you have that standard margin between the leaves. This is UL listed for fire-rated fire door applications. And a fun fact, all spring hinges that are used on fire-rated doors must be labeled. You can have a product that's listed that has met the requirements of a fire-rated application, and on file at the testing laboratory there is paperwork that can be produced or reproduced and forwarded upon demand to ensure, to reassure, and to attest that a hinge has passed the test for the fire-rated application, whatever it might be, 3 hour probably. Ball bearing non-spring hinges don't have to be labeled. They're listed, meaning there's evidence on file at the testing laboratory, but they don't have to be labeled. That's just the way it is. Spring hinges, however, must be labeled, and you will find spring hinges in the world that are not labeled, so be mindful of that. I had a client order some spring hinges, and, we're talking about the lead time, well, I need them sooner than that. Okay, fine, I understand. Tell me this, are you installing these on a fire-rated door? Well, yes, I am. Well, the hinges you ordered can't be used on a fire-rated door because NFPA 80 specifically states, the code, NFPA 80 is a standard. When it's referred to in building code, it becomes part of the code. But the standard, the NFPA 80, specifically states that spring hinges are to be labeled. So anyway, the client had a fire-rated door, so we had to switch them to a stock hinge that was properly labeled for use on the fire-rated application. That's what that looks like. Okay. It's a grade 1 hinge. That means that this hinge has been tested to exceed 1 million cycles, or to meet 1 million cycles. I was having a conversation with the engineer from the manufacturer, Bommer, at one point and said, we're talking about an improper application of spring hinges. A client said, hey, they're continually failing. Send me some pictures. Well, we discovered that they're installing them wrong, meaning that they're literally surface mounting them. So they would open the door like this and then expect it to close. They were using it as a reverse action. And while you can turn that collar around the opposite way, it's not meant to work that way. Well, as soon as I sent the photographs to the manufacturer, he knew. Actually, I didn't even send the photographs at that point. I just described it. Spring hinges failing. Are they surface mounted? Yes, that's why they're failing. They're not reverse. They can manufacture them as reverse spring hinges. In fact, they can manufacture reverse full surface spring hinges, what the client really needed. Well, actually, no, a full surface spring hinge would already be meant to operate that way. So we were talking about this application, and I says, how did you know? He's like, listen, I've tested my hinges. I've had hinges like this cycling over 3 million times, and I just pulled the plug out of the wall. I didn't see a reason to keep going. So certainly will hit 1 million cycles. They're non-handed. This hinge can be used in any sort of orientation that you require. Okay, you can turn it end for end. They call it self-lubricating bearings, and that's a reference back to the LB part of the part number, Lube bearing. Easily adjustable spring tension. We're going to talk about that spring collar that's there. Special template hole location, we discussed that. If you're not sure if this is correct, refer to that template and double check everything. From the top of the hinge to the center of each hole, from the edge of the leaf to the vertical center of each hole. This pivot point aligns with hinges that are from 85 thousandths to 109 thousandths. You have to use compatible thickness leaf hinges when you are using 1 or 2 spring hinges with 1 or 2 non-spring hinges, which Bommer does not sell. I've had people try to find these hinges in this 3 3/4 wide and a polished bronze finish. Hey, where can I get the non-spring hinges? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't have any contact with Peachtree, and I'm not even sure if they're still in business. They may be. But at the end, I've just consulted clients to simply buy all spring hinges and don't set the tension on all of them. Or even those instances when the client didn't require a spring hinge, just couldn't find the 3 3/4 with the special hole template, buy the spring hinges. Don't set any tension on them at all. This is indeed designed for Peachtree. But back to the hinge thickness, you can't use a commercial grade hinge thickness leaf, because what will happen is the vertical axis of pivoting won't be compatible with the thicker leaf hinge as the unit goes through its open and closing cycle. You're going to have different dimensional properties based on the grade of the hinge, which will affect how well or whether or not it's going to work with this spring hinge. Again, made of steel with square corners, 96 thousandths. There are 8 holes in this hinge. Maximum door size is 3 foot by 7 foot for fire-rated applications. And that is, again, a reference out of NFPA 80. That is the maximum size that you can use a spring hinge on. In terms of this size spring hinge, this type of spring hinge. There are spring hinges that can be used on larger, heavier doors, but they're not an LB4350. Bommer does have those products, but they're inherently an entirely different type of hinge. So be mindful of that. If you're doing 308s, you won't be closing them in accordance with established references in NFPA 80, National Fire Protection Agency, document 80. 80. So recommended weight, 2 spring hinges for doors up to 85 pounds, and then 3 for 110-pound doors. There's a link to the replacement tension pin. For every hinge you order, you'll get 1 tension pin. For every order that you'll place, you'll get 1 tension rod, and you need both of those pieces to make the hinge self-closing and to set it into a self-closing situation. So on the box itself is important information. There's that reference to NFPA 80 right there. It requires a minimum of 2 hinges on labeled fire doors. You would certainly always have 2 because 1 would not be adequate to close a typical fire door. It would simply be too heavy. But that information is linked to down below in the document called Certifications and Hinge Selection Guide. That data is basically the installation instructions and the hinge certification guide. That is all replicated in those 2 documents that are linked to down below. So the hinge certifications and hinge selection guide, that will give you the information that tells you it's grade 1, that it is a single acting hinge, and they state the hallmark of using a spring hinge would be that reduces the cost of having to purchase and install a door closer, a hydraulic closer, which is technically true, certainly. For use in hotels, motels, apartments, residences, where doors are required to be self-closing. Always verify local fire code requirements. Your local jurisdiction might have a different requirement for whatever reason. I'm not aware of any, but the standard, the NFPA standard, then local building code, then finally the authority having jurisdiction, that person makes the final decision on things such as this. Maximum door size and number of hinges required is based on limits set forth in NFPA 80. Requires a minimum of 2 hinges. LB4350 series hinges are listed for UL fire-rated openings up to and including 3-hour or A-label openings. Maximum size 3070. If you're doing non-labeled doors, you can certainly go with up to a 4-foot door up to 7'6" tall. And then using an additional hinge for every 30-inch thereafter. So 90-inch is the cutoff, 89 and 63 64ths would be the cutoff for 3 hinges. When you hit 90, you're going to have 4 hinges, and then 120 would be 5 hinges, etc. You would never put spring hinges on such a door. They have the door, below it is a table. They have the size of the hinge in columns, the weight of the hinge in rows, and they're telling you how many spring hinges or regular butt hinges you should use. If you're mixing and matching butt hinges and spring hinges, the butt hinge should always be ball bearing and should always be located at the top position. Spring hinges would be middle bottom or middle bottom in a non-fire rated application. The reason that the top hinge is what gets the ball bearing hinge is because 70% of the door weight, 70% of that door's weight is hung by that top hinge, and a spring hinge is technically not load bearing. They wouldn't list this as a load bearing hinge. So you want the top hinge being that hinge that is specifically rated for carrying weight rather than doing a job like self-closing. And then additional information on the notes about using the leaf thickness in accordance with the size of hinge that you're using. Now, the installation instructions basically tell us when you install this, simply hang the door. Just hang the door with the hinge as it comes right out of the box. There's no spring tension set on this whatsoever. After the door is hung, you're going to insert the tension pin, the tension rod, into one of the holes in the tension collar. This tension collar, you'll notice there's one here and there's not one here. You can install it like this, but for purposes of the video, we're going to show it, demonstrate with the collar up. When the collar is pointed towards the top of the door, you rotate it clockwise, and it's into one of those new holes that you will drop your tension pin. Do not exceed 3 holes if your door is going to swing past 90 degrees. And if you go up to 90 degrees, you can go to 4 holes of tension. And that's just how you set them. You'll certainly want to maybe keep that tension rod around somewhere, because I find that spring hinges need to be adjusted over time. I've seen them used in lots of applications naturally, but a 3-flat entry exterior door to a 3-flat building in a northern climate comes to mind. The tension that you'll set on that sort of spring hinge is going to be different in January than it is in August. Windows are left open, air pressures are different, and the ability to best control the closing and latching of your door is something that ought to be done as the requirements based on the environment change as well. You don't want the door slamming. Sometimes they slam and then bounce back open. Obviously, damage to the frame occurs when you have a slamming door. You can back that tension off. But if it's that 3-flat entry, you probably have an electric strike with an intercom panel, so you want that door to close and latch every time. Now, speaking of that, I'm really not a fan of spring hinges at all. I think that hydraulic door closers should be used because you have control over the door. It's a door control device. Via valves and hydraulics, you can tailor how fast or slow the door goes through different parts of the closing cycle. The latching cycle, which is about 0 to 12 degrees. The sweep cycle, which is from about 13 to about 80 degree or so. You can get into the delayed action, into the back check area, so that you can control that stuff. You wouldn't probably use back check in that example that we're discussing. But you can make that door operate correctly, and the point is, when the door gets into the closed position, it operates properly so that it will actually latch the door. What I don't naturally like about spring hinges is that when you set the tension and then you open the door, well, you've got stored energy in that spring, and then when you let the door go, that stored energy is released and the door moves through the closing cycle. The problem is at the very critical last 10 degrees, that latching portion of the closing cycle. If you don't have enough spring hinges there or enough stored energy or residual energy, it's difficult to get the door to close and latch. You're overcoming the friction of the strike plate in the frame, the latch bolt hitting the strike, weather stripping that's installed, an improper installation where a frame has jam legs that are not plumb, true, level, and square, and the door is actually trying to close like this. So hydraulic control is really great. The bottom line is a door closer is not appropriate according to some people in all instances. If you're building a 100-unit condo building, you're probably not going to see surface-mounted door closers installed on those doors, or even stairwell doors. I've seen people install steel doors and frames and use spring hinges on the stairwell doors. That's a botheration only because, in my experience, spring hinges are less predictable, reliable when it comes to knowing that the door is going to be in the closed position. And a stair tower a stairwell with fire-rated doors, those doors need to be closed and latched at all times. So be mindful. A spring hinge is used, in my opinion. Spring hinges are used when there's concerns other than doing everything possible to ensure that the door is going to close and latch. So be mindful of that. Looking at the rest of the installation instructions, it's as simple as that. Now, I don't overset the tension. I've had people call and say, yeah, the hinge, the spring broke. Well, to Bommer, that's, when they've tested something. Now, finally, the last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo. And right above it, it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer, this is their part number LB4350-400-637. Single acting spring hinge in a polished bronze finish, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.